Hello everyone, Andy Warren, Stuart Watson here on Transfer Deadline Day. Stu, where is your yellow tie?
No yellow tie from me today.
No, and how many phones have you got?
Just the one.
Just one phone.
Just the one.
Transfer Deadline Day at Ipswich Town. It's been perhaps a little busier than we were expecting, but it's certainly not. It's not kicking off like the rest of the country. What have we had today, Stu? We've had Monty Patterson has departed Ipswich Town for Wellington Phoenix in the A-League, and the news just breaking now is that we understand that Flynn is heading out on loan for the rest of the season. He's going to the League Two leaders, Luton, and on the face of it, while it leaves Ipswich a midfielder down at a time when so many more are out injured, it sounds like a great move for a player who's proved he can cut it at first team level, but will have a limited opportunity here for the rest of the season.
I think this one will split fans, definitely. Just seeing some of the social media reaction thus far. On one hand, people will say there's very little for Ipswich Town to play for between now and the end of the season, realistically. So why not use this as an opportunity to develop a player who looked more than capable in the early stages of the season. On the flip side of that, it's a chance for him to go to a team that's top of the table, as you say. I think they're 8 points clear at the top of League Two at the moment. Go there, get regular game time, playing in front, in a competitive environment in front of a proper crowd, and get a promotion on his CV and come back a more developed player for Ipswich Town come the start of next season. So his last appearance was, I'm just having a look, was in that win at Derby as a 60th minute substitute. That was at the end of November. 3 starts, 7 substitute appearances in the Championship, and those 2 cup starts. Of course, one of those cup starts will have been against Luton in the
first round.
Did he feature in the first round against Luton? I'd need to double check that because he's had 2 cup starts. But anyway, Luton, Nathan Jones, Luton manager, has apparently watched him a few times in the 23s and will know all about him. And I think the more I think about it kind of makes sense. I think it's going to be more beneficial for him to play in that competitive environment at Luton between now and the end of the season than perhaps having restricted opportunities, because ultimately, Scoos, Connolly, Gleeson are all certainly ahead of him in the pecking order. Luke Himes back again now, and I actually think Luke's looked pretty handy in the couple of substitute appearances he's had thus far. So eventually Flynn may well jump ahead a few of those in the pecking order, but probably makes sense for him to go out to Luton.
Yeah, guys, let us know what you think. Good move, bad move, good move for Ipswich, bad move for Ipswich, good move for Flynn, bad move for Flynn. That's set to be confirmed later this afternoon. Not gone through yet. Monty Patterson, as we say, is the only actual transfer news today. He's left for Wellington in the A-League, out of contract at the end of the season. We've barely seen him kick a ball, so it's nothing overly significant to the first team matters. But there is stuff going on, Stu. There's a lot of talk surrounding David McGoldrick. Not an awful lot of action, and it doesn't sound like there's going to be. The destinations are dropping flies, it seems, for David McGoldrick.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a summer issue now with David McGoldrick. Cardiff were the main protagonists in that. I think 5 clubs in the end in the Championship were linked with him, but as you say, they've kind of all dropped like flies. Cardiff reportedly close to signing Gary Medine from Bolton, who was very impressive against Ipswich recently. £6 million they're talking for him, so that gives you a bit of context to the fees that are going on at the moment. So Cardiff, Villa, Steve Bruce kind of ruled them out of the reckoning for him yesterday. Said he's looking more for a number 9 type than a number 10. And Cotterill at Birmingham today has said that I think his business is done as well.
I think a lot, apart from any major outgoings, I think they're done. So that doesn't leave an awful lot for David there.
Fulham and Sheffield Wednesday were linked, but I think they were much more of a tenuous link, really, to be honest. So yes, I think come 11 o'clock tonight, David McGoldrick will still be an Ipswich Town player. Do I think he'll be an Ipswich Town player come the start of next season? My gut feeling is probably no. I think he's out of contract. Ipswich don't unusually have that 12-month extension clause with him, so I can see him maybe wanting a fresh challenge, and Ipswich maybe wanting to free up a few wages to invest in something a little bit more longer term.
Yeah, Paul's mentioned on the comments there that given the fees kind of going around today, Ipswich aren't even aren't in the hunt, as it were. There are some crazy fees going around the Championship today. Jordan Hugo, one that Ipswich were quoted, $4 million for in the summer?
Yeah.
Crystal Palace are being quoted $8 million. It's Tom Kearney. Apparently Fulham have put a £40 million price tag on the Championship's best midfielder, I would say, but £40 million just shows what a crazy market the January market is, let alone the rest of the year. It's great. Crazy times, and Ipswich certainly won't be competing with these.
No, it's not a good time to do business. It always sounds sort of like a bit of an excuse, but I think generally the prices can become inflated. If you want in-form established players, then you pay a premium to prize them away from clubs, don't you? Clubs almost thinking, we've seen it with Premier League clubs thinking, would they rather keep a player till the end of the season and risk them losing them for nothing than selling them for, the Johnny Evans situation, for example. West Brom would rather let him go for nothing at the end of the season. If he keeps them up, potentially, that's worth far more than 10, 20, 30 million in fees because of what it means to stay in the Premier League, and that there'll be a microcosm of that situation at various different clubs. So yeah, you're right. Some of the fees you mentioned there are crazy, really. You just wonder with Jordan Hugo whether Ipswich regret not pushing the boat out on him this time last year, because I think they were, like you say, they were joking about sort of. I remember Simon Grayson was Preston manager at the time, wasn't he? And Ipswich had played, and I think he scored against Ipswich up there, and he said, he's just put another $1 million on his fees, up to $4 million now, and that was kind of said as a throwaway sort of joke comment. As if to say he's never worth $4 million, and it's doubled now, if not more. So that just shows you how the market's inflating. And Ipswich are getting, are just not competing in that terms of money at the moment. Their plan seems to be looking to sort of the lower leagues and Irish market as per usual, and hoping they can uncover a few gems for the longer term, I guess.
Harvey on the comments has brought up David McGoldrick's contract. No, it doesn't have the 1 year option in it, which is unusual. This predates my time here, really. Stu, any idea why that? Is it just a timing thing when that deal was done? Different approaches? Or
No.
Could be just a preference.
Get the feeling it might have been David's request when they negotiated the last one. He would have foreseen this situation coming up. I'll be about to turn 30. He's just turned 30 recently. And he probably was aware that, at this stage, this will be his last chance to try and negotiate his last big contract. So I guess it's prudent from his point of view. He's been pretty open about the situation, hasn't he? I think in an interview earlier this year, he said it's a massive season for him, that he'll be a bit of a crossroads. His family, he's got a big family, and they're based in the East Midlands still, so that may have a role to play as well. Sometimes we forget that these players, we talk about them as commodities and millions of pounds, but they're human beings with families and all the rest of it as well. So that will come into it. It just feels to me that there's enough elements that are all going to add up to maybe him moving on. And Ipswich, we all know that David on his day is a complete joy to watch. One of the best in the Championship. Certainly one of Ipswich's few bits of star quality, but consistency, I think we have to say, has been a bit of an issue with David. Decision making, his current form's not been great, and of course he's had these 2 years of wretched injury form as well. So all things considered, both for player and club, they might feel that a fresh start's required for both coming the summer. That
contract's probably the biggest Ipswich Town news of this transfer window is probably Bart's new contract. We'll go through some of the ins and outs in a minute, which we all know about, but Bart's new contract extension, which isn't signed yet. I think Mick was at pains to stress that at the weekend, wasn't he? It's agreed, not signed.
Yeah.
But obviously very important to secure the future of their best player. I'm sure he'll sign it soon.
Yes, that's just a little interesting subplot, just to keep everybody on tenterhooks. I see Palace are still after another goalkeeper. Did they get that? The Spanish lad over the line, did he sign it?
My Palace supporting friends tell me that deal's agreed pre-contract for the summer. They're now trying to get him out of that early, which is where the transfer fee would come involved. So they had Wayne Hennessy in goal last night, and he managed to somehow try to throw the ball out and managed to throw it onto his own foot last night, and that's their that's their frustrations with that goalkeeper. But I think they've got other irons in the fire. I wouldn't have thought Bart spending that money on Bart. It's interesting though.
I think it's basically done, isn't it? For Mick to be confident enough to kind of mention it in a press conference that the contract is agreed and all the rest of it, I don't think they'd be putting that out there if there was any concern. But interesting nonetheless. You're right. When Mick was asked about Bart signing his new 3-year contract, it's a 2-year contract with an option, so that's why it's being called a 3-year contract. But yeah, interesting that Mick was very quick to sort of say, no, it's agreed, it's not signed yet. So, but no, yeah, Bart's staying, and that's great news. I think he is firmly on his way to becoming a bit of a cult fan's favourite here at this football club. He's got that big banner, Polish banner that's unfurled on the north stand. So 2 times Player of the Year, Supporters Player of the Year. Good chance that he could get it for the 3rd year in a row, which kind of tells you everything about Ipswich at the moment. If your goalkeeper's winning it every year, that's probably not a good sign where you're at as a club. I'm a huge fan of Bart, both as a personality and a person, and I've been fortunate enough to spend a bit of time with him and his family, and also his form has been outstanding. But if I'm being brutally honest, there might be just a couple of little flaws in his game that's just prevented him being sort of chased by a whole load of Premier League clubs in terms of, if you were really picking at kicking and catching and crosses and all the rest of it. But my word, as a shot stopper, he's been outstanding, and last weekend another a heap load of them for the highlights reel, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Ipswich would take a flawed Bart. I think that they're quite happy with their flawed goalkeeper.
Absolutely, yeah.
A bit of breaking news being fed through to us. It seems like Mustafa Carriol is being linked with a move. He's at Nottingham Forest at the moment.
Yeah.
Until the end of the season. A player I've always quite liked. He can run with the ball. He's a wide guy, wide player, which would fit a bill at Ipswich at the moment.
Look into that as soon as we stop doing this. But for me, that would be absolutely make sense. It would tick the boxes in terms of Mick's always looking for someone experienced that knows their way around the Championship. I seem to remember him having a few decent games against Ipswich and against Chambers in particular. So I'm sure that will stick in Mick's head. I mean, a lot of his signings have been players that have played well against Ipswich. I've been saying for a few weeks now that, and I mentioned this in the press conference to Mick, that I feel that they're a little bit short in terms of wide attacking players. They're playing this 4-2-3-1 system, and the only real natural width they've got is Selina on the left and Grant Ward on the right. Ward's missed a load of games recently with a groin injury. I thought they looked a lot more balanced when Ward and Selina were both playing. While Ward's been out, they've been crowbarring McGoldrick in on the right, and of course we had the long running saga with Freddie Sears playing as a winger, and that's not worked really. McGoldrick's looked a little lost last weekend. He was virtually right back for most of the game, and when they were 1-0 down and entering the last 10 minutes, there wasn't really a huge amount of options for Mick to freshen it up. I mean, he was very quick to sort of say, we've scored a few goals this season, how many goals have we scored? And there was a sort of a sarcastic put down when I sort of suggested that did he need another option further forward? And listen, great, we were calling them the Fab Four earlier in the season, and credit to Mick, he's gone a lot more attack minded. He's played with the front four pretty much most games, but we have to say over the last 8 games, there's been 1 win in the last 8 games. I think 4 goals in that time. The chances have dried up. I just think that somebody like Carriol would provide a few more options just to freshen things up and shuffle the pack from time to time. So that makes sense to me. I don't know what his situation is, Carriol, but are we looking into that as soon as we stop this?
It sounds like a free transfer until the end of the season, which would also fit the bill of Town's recruitment policy over the last few weeks, as Mick stated at the beginning of the month. Another incoming player is Neymar, of course. Not actually Neymar, Barry Cotter. Doesn't have quite the ring to it, but he does look like Neymar, right back from Limerick in Ireland, and that sounds like it's one for the development side of things. He's a teenager, very athletic. Sounds very similar in style to Josh Emmanuel, which I guess will lead to a few questions about his future. But he's flown over from Dublin, we understand today, and that should be done by the deadline. But I think other than that, I think that would most likely be the conclusion of any business, wouldn't it? Certainly if there's one more before tonight to add to Stephen Gleeson, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Aaron Drinan and Chris Gattani, the French defender, another for the development squad. What do you make of that as a block of January business?
Well, it's kind of short-term sticking plasters, isn't it, to kind of get us from here to the end of the season. You know, overriding all of this has been the manager's situation, which we're still in the dark about as we have been all season. We don't need to go into all the details of that again, but you know, there's no doubt that they've signed short-term players for two reasons really. One, you know, in terms of midfield, they've got a lot of players to come back, you know, from injury. So you've got Emir Hughes, Tom Adeyemi, another injury setback for him, it sounds, but those two to come back in the summer from long-term injury. Hopefully Downs and Nydam sort of more developed and more ready for it next season as well. So there was no need to rush out and sign a central midfielder, so short-term made sense on that one. They're going to need to look at centre-back long-term, you know, once Carter-Vickers' loan is out, because that leaves you with Chambers and Webster. So going into this season with three centre-backs was slightly risky and proved to be very risky, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. No one could foresee the amount of injuries they've had located to certain positions. But yeah, the manager's situation, if I was a player trying to be attracted to Ipswich mid-season, you know, inevitably you're going to ask what's the manager's future. So there's no surprise that they've had to kind of just get short-term signings. I think the short-term signings they've made have been sensible. I think we've seen enough of Gleeson in his game and a half so far to see that he's a tidy, positive midfield player that, you know, perhaps they've lacked. So there's potential for that to go beyond the summer. You know, similar situation to Jordan Spence, who came in mid-season last year and proved his worth and got the deal and has been a solid signing. Carter-Vickers, watch this space. I don't know what, you know, that seems to me more of a short-term one, I think. But
yeah, Aaron Drinan we've not seen yet. I'm sure we will at some point. A couple of questions on Mick's future. George has asked if Mick will leave, which we have no more knowledge of that than we did last week, and that kind of changes on a weekly.
I wish I could tell you
basis.
I think we'd be 95% certain to say it's heading that way if we're reading between the lines, but we may all be putting two and two together and coming up with five, and I wouldn't put my mortgage on it. You know, Marcus Evans, I'm sure if he stepped away from it, he's weighing up the fall in attendances and increasing apathy against Mick doing a solid job on a limited budget, keeping them competitive, and he'll be wondering, could they go backwards? You know, be careful what you wish for is the argument that keeps getting thrown. So Marcus, I could see a situation where Marcus offers Mick something, and I could see a situation where Mick puts all of his disappointment and frustration to one side and thinks, actually, I'm working for one of the most patient, non-interfering owners in the game here. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I could paint you a situation, as I just have done quite easily, where it could happen. So you
could certainly argue both sides, but Mick's not actually really giving any suggestion that he might stay. Everything Mick says is pointing one way, but if you think about it points the other way. Harvey's brought up a link, which I think was from a national newspaper, to John McGreal, which is a nice thought. Doesn't quite stack up to what Ipswich would need. Doesn't mean they're not interested, but you know, former players always go down well as managers. But for me, I would say, Ipswich wouldn't be one that they'd be looking at. I wouldn't have thought at this stage.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it obviously brings up memories of George Burley, who was poached from just over the Essex border from Colchester. What was that, Christmas Eve '94?
Yep.
You know, former Ipswich player himself, and and look what happened for Ipswich there. And Ipswich have a history of their best managerial appointments, and there's not been many as a club in their 80-something year history. There's only been a handful of managers really, but they're Bobby Robson and others were, they took a bit of a risk and a bit of a gamble on those managers, and I think a lot of fans would want to see Ipswich, that such is this kind of overriding apathy is the word I keep using, that I think Ipswich fans need something that's seen as a project and a manager that sees it as a step up and is proud to be Ipswich manager, and not just the next manager that comes off the managerial merry-go-round. But is that John McGreal?
It's his first season.
I think, nothing against John. I think, but even Colchester fans and the people that I see Colchester regularly say that, that's still a project for them. They're not setting League Two alight at the moment, and I think, who knows, maybe another year or two down the line, he might be the right sort of manager, but I don't see it the here and now being quite the right fit for Ipswich at the moment.
As it's transfer deadline day, I suppose we should talk about Harry Redknapp. George has just brought up Harry Redknapp, Ipswich Town manager. Thoughts? My thoughts are just no. would be my thoughts. I think there's a relationship there of sorts, isn't there, between Ipswich and Harry Redknapp? But I would be surprised if Harry Redknapp went back into management again after having fingers burned at Birmingham.
How many of those type of managers, though, are addicted to football and they insist that they're out of it and they keep getting lured back time and time again? You're right, there is that connection with Marcus. I think Harry is, certainly in the early days of Marcus Evans' tenure here, was very much one of his kind of football confidants while he was finding his way in football, which is unlike any other business that Marcus Evans would have worked in. I think when Mick got the job, it was between Mick, Ian Holloway and Harry Redknapp was very much in there as a three. I think the situation, you're right, is different now, and we just talked about the latest manager to kind of come off the merry-go-round. I'm not sure that would be the right one for me either.
He's been off that merry-go-round a few times as well. He does keep getting back on, like you say.
And he's someone that likes to spend a bit of money and likes to do a bit of business, and I'm not sure that would be the right fit with this Ipswich Town sort of 5-point long-term project of trying to sign lower league players and develop players and academy and all the rest of it.
One last question before we get back to some transfers and make some inquiries about Mustafa Carriol. Is Daniel just says, where do you see Ipswich finishing this season? And for me, that's mid-table. Yeah, probably somewhere whereabouts they are now. We've been saying that for a long time. Even when we were desperately trying to kind of cling on to a sense of hope earlier in the season, when they started a lot better than expected, the football was more entertaining, they were scoring goals. I think even deep down in our private discussions, we kind of felt that there were limitations there. And understandably because of the budget and also because of the injuries that they've had. But they were scoring virtually every shot they were having at that stage. They were ultra clinical, and we just wondered whether there would come a stage where that dried up. And it has done. And there's enough spirit there for them to grind out wins and results when they need it. The Leeds game recently is an example of that. But I can just see a kind of win-lose, win-draw, lose, a bit of that sort of scenario between now and the end of the season, and you're right, they'll end up somewhere in the middle of the pack. What a note to finish on. Nathan, Stuart Watson to be new Ipswich manager. I agree.
No.
He's turned it down.
No
World
chance.
Exclusive, he's turned it down. He'd be awful with the press. He'd be awful. Anyway.
Ban them all immediately, yeah.
That's it for now. If there's any other breaking transfer news, we'll be back, I'm sure, at some point later on. We'll go and check out Mustafa Carriol. Thanks for watching, thanks for getting your questions in, and we'll see you soon.